When marvelling upon Middle-earth's Dwarven fortresses, Elven palaces, and imposing cities of men, one can easily wonder how all these grand places and their material cultures come into being. Tolkien was a philologist, not an economist, but when reading between the pages of his works, a semblance of economic life is present in its various cultures. Indeed, Tolkien devoted a considerable amount of thought to the whithertos and why-fors of everyday life in his world, a phenomenon just waiting to be explored. In this latest video in our series on the economies and societies of Middle-earth, we will explore the lives of the stout, bearded children of Durin who dwell under the mountains, the mighty Dwarves. As the people of Middle-earth knew, a strong economy means nothing if you can't stop enemies from destroying it. See if you can manage it by playing our sponsor, Call of War. It's a free PvP strategy game in which your own World War II plays out in real time over the course of weeks, and you're tasked with managing your economy, technology, diplomacy, and of course, warfare. Make real allies and enemies with up to 100 other players, use loads of World War II units and secret weapons, and compose a grand strategy to conquer the world. It's a great game to dip in and out of since it happens over a long period, and you can adjust your empire anytime on PC or mobile. Get the game for free via our link in the description and you'll get an exclusive gift, 13,000 gold and 1 month of premium subscription for free, but only for the next 30 days, so don't waste time. It is common knowledge that the dwarf is, by nature, an industrious creature. When the Valar Eloi created the dwarves, Yavanna said of them, "They will love first the things made by their own hands, as doth their father. They will delve in the earth, and the things that grow and live upon the earth they will not heed. Many a tree shall feel the bite of their iron without pity." Indeed, when picturing the dwarves of Middle-earth, mining is undoubtedly the first thing that comes to mind. The dwarves seem to practically only reside underground, obsessed with digging up all the riches that the world can provide. Consequently, they are also renowned for their craftsmanship, responsible for incredible feats of metalwork, such as Mithril Ring Mail. Moreover, some of the greatest cities of Middle-earth, such as Khazad-dûm, are the result of Dwarven masonry. All of this, however, begs a simple question. If Durin's folk spent almost all their time devoted to such work, how then did they feed themselves? Dwarves, like the other races of Middle-earth, require food to survive, and quite a lot of it at that. Take for example the rotund Bombur, who could not have grown so enormous if his people were bereft of victuals. Food reaches the stone tables of Dwarven feasting halls in various ways. Foraging was one, evidenced by the value Mim the petty dwarf placed in a wild root known as earth bread. "They are of great worth," he said, "more than gold in the hungry winter, for they may be hoarded like the nuts of a squirrel, and already we are building our store from the first that are ripe." We already know dwarves practiced agriculture, which, in early times they practiced when isolated and unable to buy grain etc. by barter. They had invented a plough of some sort, which they dragged as well as steered themselves. They were tough and strong, but they did not delight in such labour of necessity. Given this evident reticence to till and grow, it comes as no surprise that some dwarves disregarded foraging and cultivation altogether in favour of their much preferred method of acquiring necessities, trade. By the Third Age, Thorin Oakenshield emphasises this when speaking of his people's relationship with the men of Dale. They built the merry town of Dale there in those days. Kings used to send for our smiths and reward even the least skillful most richly. Fathers would beg us to take their sons as apprentices and pay us handsomely, especially in food supplies, which we never bothered to grow or find for ourselves. Altogether, those were good days for us, and the poorest of us had money to spend and to lend, and leisure to make beautiful things just for the fun of it, not to speak of the most marvellous and magical toys, the like of which is not to be found in the world nowadays. So my grandfather's halls became full of armour and jewels and carvings and cups, and the toy market of Dale was the wonder of the north. Indeed, commerce seemed to be the main method for dwarves to feed themselves, and thus be able to devote the majority of their time to their mining and craftsmanship. Let us use this as a segue to provide a more in-depth picture of how and with whom Dwarven trade was conducted. During the First Age, before the dawning of men, elves were the primary trading partner of the dwarves. The Sindar, not under the rule of Thingol, dwelt and practiced not only cattle rearing and sheep farming, but also grain growing and other food crops, on which they prospered because both Doriath West and the Dwarves East were ready to buy what they could. Indeed, like the men of Dale later would, the elves traded their food and in return received the skilled labour of Dwarven craftsmen, which we see in the construction of Menegroth, the city built for the elven king of the First Age, Thingol. Therefore, the Nalgrim laboured long and gladly for Thingol and devised for him mansions after the fashion of their people, delved deep in the earth. Where the Escalduin flowed down and parted Neldereth from the region, there rose in the midst of the forest a rocky hill, and the river ran at its feet. There they made the gates of the hall of Thingol, and they built a bridge of stone over the river, by which alone the gates could be entered. Beyond the gates, wide passages ran down to high halls and chambers far below that were hewn in the living stone, so many and so great that the dwelling was named Menegroth, the Thousand Caves. Alongside Menegroth, the dwarves also helped build the elven stronghold of Nargothrond, a feat for which they were compensated handsomely. Being so heavily reliant on trade, it should be no surprise that the dwarves invested heavily in the infrastructure required for the efficient transport of goods, of which included the construction of a grand road network. The Dwarf Road, Meni Norgrim, has been made with great labour by the Longbeard dwarfs of Moria and their kin in the Iron Hills. The dwarfs trafficked into Beleriand, and they made a great road that passed under the shoulders of Mount Dolmed and followed the course of the river Askar, crossing Gelion at Sarna Thrad, the Ford of Stones, where the battle after befell. Ever cool was the friendship between Norgrim and the Eldar, though much profit they had one of the other. The construction of Meni Norgrim spanned across the First and Second Age, but the eventual end result was a massive road network upon which trade could be conducted at an unprecedented scale. At the height of their relationship, a great number of dwarves were hired to work in the elven smithies. This would have required much economic activity from both parties. They travelled the ancient road to Doriath, for their skill in the working of metal and stone was very great, and there was much need of their craft in the halls of Menegroth. But they came now no longer in small parties as aforetime, but in great companies, well armed for their protection in the perilous lands between Aros and Gelion, and they dwelt in Menegroth at such times in chambers and smithies set apart for them. Through trade, dwarves and elves created many great halls, including one of the most beautiful creations in all of Arda, that of the Nalglamir, imbued with a Silmaril. This, however, would ultimately result in the enduring blood feud between dwarves and elves. Yet as Durin's folk turned their back to the elves, their relationship with new partners, namely the race of men, began to grow. When the dwarves first came into contact with men, they established the same symbiotic trade-based relationship they once had with the elves. By this point in time, the elves were not as foregoing with trade, and the bearded folk needed new partners to support their cave-dwelling lifestyle. To that end, the dwarves traded their knowledge, labour and crafts with men, who provided them with much-needed food in return. Men held them in awe and were eager to learn from them, and the Longbeards were very willing to use men for their own purposes. Thus there grew up in those regions the economy, later characteristic of the dealings of dwarves and men, including hobbits. Men became the chief providers of food, as herdsmen, shepherds and land tillers, which the dwarves exchanged for work as builders, road makers, miners, and the makers of things of craft, from useful tools to weapons and arms, and many other things of great cost and skill, to the great profit of the dwarves. Not only to be reckoned in hours of labour, though in early times the dwarves must have obtained goods that were the product of greater and longer toil than the things or services they gave in exchange, before men became wiser and developed skills of their own. This prosperous commercial relationship between dwarves and men allowed Durin's folk to continue to devote themselves to their jewelers, smithies and stonemasons, but soon it would blossom into something much more. It is here we will explore the place of diplomacy and alliance in the Dwarven world. Before long, what began as a utilitarian partnership for the sake of acquiring provisions became an alliance of necessity for defense against the dark forces of Morgoth all about Arda. No dwarf would ever mount a horse willingly, nor did any ever harbour animals, not even dogs. But men were glad of the alliance, for they were more vulnerable to the attacks of the orcs. They dwelt largely in scattered homesteads and villages, and if they drew together into small townships they were poorly defended, at best by dikes and wooden fences. Also they were lightly armed, chiefly with bows, for they had little metal and the few smiths among them had no great skill. These things the dwarves amended in return for one great service that men could offer. They were tamers of beasts and had learned the mastery of horses, and many were skilled and fearless riders. These would often ride far afield as scouts and keep watch on the movements of their enemies. And if the orcs dared to assemble in the open for some great raid, they would gather a great force of horsed archers to surround them and destroy them. In these ways, the alliance of dwarves and men in the north came early in the Second Age to command great strength, swift in attack, and valiant and well protected in defense. And there grew up in that region between dwarves and men respect and esteem, and sometimes warm friendship. It seems that, in repelling the orcs, the dwarves provided weaponry, and men the means to use it. This symbiotic relationship between dwarves and men would continue to be tested throughout the ages. During the Third Age, when Smaug descended upon the Lonely Mountain, both the men of Dale and dwarves of Erebor were caught off guard. Their warriors were both called to arms, but were destroyed by the Great Dragon. Both groups shouldered the loss together, and would soon do so again, for when Sauron's armies besieged Minas Tirith, he also sent armies to threaten the borders of King Brand of Dale. Sauron's forces crossed the river of Canan King, driving King Brand back to Dale, where, with the help of the dwarves of Erebor, he made a stand and fought the Easterling army. There was a great battle at the mountain's feet. It lasted 3 days, but in the end both King Brand and King Dane Ironfoot were slain, and the Easterlings had the victory. But they could not take the gate, and many, both dwarves and men, took refuge in Erebor, and there withstood a siege. When news came of the great victories in the south, then Sauron's northern army was filled with dismay, and the besieged came forth and routed them, and the remnant fled into the east and troubled Dale no more. Then Bard II, Brand's son, became king in Dale, and Thorin III Stonehelm, Dane's son, became king under the mountain. Indeed, the shared history of the dwarves of Erebor and men of Dale is a good example of how often both peoples fought and died alongside one another, a relationship that was originally kindled by the transactions of goods. Dwarves and men, and to a lesser extent elves, all benefited from an interdependent trade network based on specialized labor. The dwarves had their mining and craftsmanship, the men their agricultural cultivation, and the elves a mixture of all. Through trade, the three races began a relationship that would eventually allow them to cleanse the marring of Arda by the Dark Lord Melkor. Thanks to Call of War for sponsoring this video. Play this free online PvP strategy game to engage in epic World War II battles and conquer the world as a country of your choice. Click our link in the description to get an exclusive gift, 13,000 gold and 1 month of premium subscription for free, only for the next 30 days. We're going to talk more about the economy of Middle-earth in the coming weeks, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.